Hi everyone, this is Neel Raithatha, also known as the Wax Whisperer. Thank you for joining me in my latest video. We have here a patient who attended with a partially blocked left ear, as you just saw. They had this really hardened bald of matted keratin at the entrance of the ear, but I could still visualize the eardrum. But their right ear was fully occluding, and this ear has been giving them some problems of late. In particular, it's been causing some pain, sensitivity. The patient themselves were able to smell a foul odour coming from this ear, and they weren't sure if it was infected. Of course, their hearing has been reduced because of the occlusion, and historically, this patient used to self-irrigate his ears, or should I say self-syringe his ears. They used to instill hydrogen peroxide-based drops and then get a bulb rubber syringe and attempt to remove the wax from their ear using this method. And on a few occasions in the past, they felt their symptoms had improved, but they attempted to self-irrigate just recently, and they didn't find it made any difference. So at first this looks like a wax plug, but as the procedure continues, this actually, there probably was some wax, but predominantly this is a Keratosis obturans, a grade 3. So a lot of this is hardened keratin. So the skin that lines the ear canal, as it dies and sheds, it should move sideways, laterally out of the ear. So this the ear's self-cleansing mechanism. If it wasn't able to do that, then all the skin in the ear will just collect and form into a plug, which is essentially what's happened in this patient's case. And the outer layer of skin, the epidermis has actually got 5 layers itself, and the outermost layer of that epidermis layer of skin, called stratum corneum, it's when the skin cells are actually dead and they lose all their cellular functions, all the organelles, so the ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus, mitochondria. These are all cease to exist, and all the intracellular fluid is lost, and instead this dead skin cell is programmed in its death to secrete and produce keratin. So keratin is a protein. Not only we find it in our skin, but our hair strands and also fingernails. And keratin has got some useful properties. It's hydrophobic, so it helps the outer layer of skin repel water that may have entered the ear, because we don't want water in the ear. It can wash away the natural acidity, and of course fungi and bacteria thrive off moist, warm, dark conditions, which is what the ear is if there's water in there. Keratin is also quite reflective, so it reflects harmful UV rays from the sun. So it's a useful property to have, particularly in the ear. But in this patient's case, this dead skin, it hasn't fully migrated. Instead, it's collected in a plug. And even at this stage, I'm not sure whether this is a Keratosis obturans, but there's a couple of giveaway signs. So the patient did attend with otalgia, so pain. So that's to be diagnosed with Keratosis obturans. You must experience otalgia, so pain. Now, the roof of the ear canal isn't fully occluding, but this keratin plug extends all the way medially towards the patient's eardrum. And I'm not sure exactly when during the procedure, but I'm going to lift from the bottom of the ear canal some of this keratin, and you'll see some granulation tissue. So when you see granulation tissue at the junction of the cartilage and bones, where the cartilage and bone meet in the ear, which is the outer third, that's another hallmark of a grade 3 Keratosis obturans. So granulation tissue is inflammatory tissue. It's essentially a connective tissue that has its own supply of blood capillaries. So whenever you see granulation tissue, you know there's some sort of form of healing going on, and when you've got healing, there's some sort of form of trauma. And when you've got a grade 3 Keratosis obturans in particular, this skin plug it's forever growing. It's getting bigger and bigger and expanding against the wall of the ear canal. So it's causing physical trauma. And then that leads to inflammation. And then the body's response to that is by creating a granulation tissue. And you're going to see quite a significant widening of the ear canal, much larger than I thought. And on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see there's a little ridge of the ear canal. And underneath that ridge, you've got this keratin plug really pushing up against it. And that's going to be quite evident later on, once I remove all this. And it's this section where the patient's ear canal has widened. So it's the midsection, so the bony portion of the ear canal. And as we're removing this, because this has been there for a long, long time, there was, especially when I lifted this away off the canal walls, for example here, it did release a really foul odour. So I was a bit worried that the ear might be infected, but there was no signs of infection afterwards. It's very likely that because of this dead skin been in the ear for so long, it's just oxidized and it becomes very acidic, almost like sourdough. It's got that kind of smell to it. So we're using the full range of instruments. I've used an ear hook, suction initially. The ear pick really, really worked well here. I was able to glide in and underneath the keratin. Could have, of course, used the new Rycorrect to glide under as well, but because of how hardened this keratin was, I just needed that pointed tip, like here. And there's the granulation tissue, so it's just revealed itself underneath there. So this skin was compressed, adhered to the canal wall, and as we released it, you can see some inflammatory tissue there, granulation tissue. And the ear pick, is, because of the little angled tip to it, it really allowed me to glide in between the keratin plug and the canal walls without the tip of the ear pick coming in direct contact, because obviously that would be very painful. It's like a needle in your ear and you're poking it against the side of the ear canal. So that worked very well indeed. And the forceps, they did assist. I was hoping to get more out the forceps, if truth be told, but because this keratin is extremely adhered, not only to the floor of the ear canal, but also to the eardrum itself, the forceps themselves just not powerful enough to pull this away. So with the ear pick and the ear hook, I was able to leverage, and you'll get an idea here. So I'm gliding against the back and the floor of the ear canal actually, and you can see this silvery white peripheral matrix of the plug. This is very common with the Keratosis obturans. This is the most recent dead skin layer that hasn't oxidized. So you generally, when you remove a Keratosis obturans, you get this peripheral white or silvery matrix of skin. And even now, I'm not fully aware of how big this widening of the ear canal is. It's only once I remove it, you really begin to appreciate it. So what causes the ear canal to widen in a Keratosis obturans? As this skin plug gets bigger and bigger, there's two modes of thought. It's just the sheer pressure, because of the size of this keratin plug. It's almost like a rubber ball, so it has got a lot of kinetic energy, and that's because the keratin ball is made up of layers of skin, and they kind of fold upon each other, and so it has a lot of kinetic energy in it. It's the sheer pressure of the keratin plug up against the canal wall, widening it. And another potential reason is when this keratin plug comes up against the canal wall, it irritates a thin sheath called the periosteum, which sits on the surface of the bone. And the periosteum provides the bony part of the ear canal its blood supply, so its oxygen and nutrients. But when this periosteum is irritated, it then initiates specialist cells that sit on the surface of the bone called osteoclasts. And what osteoclasts do, they begin to break down the bone into its minerals and tissues, and it then redistributes these minerals and tissues of the bone to other parts of the body via the bloodstream. And that process is called bony resorption. And during that process, you're getting bony remodeling of the ear canal. So the ear canal widens because, as I said, the minerals and tissues that form the bone, they're being almost recycled and redistributed elsewhere, which then causes, and typically with a keratosis obturans, you get a global widening. With a canal cholesteatoma or a benign osteonecrosis, the erosion or widening is very localized, so it's a very specific point. You can get multiple localized points, but with a keratosis obturans, one of the key differentiating hallmarks is that it's a large section of the ear canal that's widened, and very importantly, with a keratosis obturans, the layer of skin, the epidermis layer, should be intact. There shouldn't be an ulceration. That is sometimes also true with benign osteonecrosis. So with the benign osteonecrosis, that's when the bone actually starts to necrotize, so it begins to decay and die away, which is different to keratosis obturans. With keratosis obturans, the process is called bony resorption. So this bone isn't being diseased away like benign osteonecrosis. With benign osteonecrosis, the bone is actually dying and it then separates. We call that sequestrium. And the underlying pathophysiology behind a benign osteonecrosis is reduced vascular supply, so reduced blood supply, typically to the floor of the ear canal, the inferior part. So the bone kind of decays away and it can separate, and you get this ditch that's created. But sometimes with a benign osteonecrosis, there's no infection there, so you've still got an intact layer of skin, the epidermis. But of course, even with a benign osteonecrosis, that skin can become ulcerized. With a canal cholesteatoma, more often than not, you get periosteitis, an infection of the periosteum, which to precede that you have an ulceration, so the skin is also diseased away. Also with a canal cholesteatoma, there's going to be an active infection in the ear. And in fact, I uploaded a case, video number 1444, of a canal cholesteatoma. So if you're not sure what these individual terms are and you're interested in learning, so if you just go to my YouTube channel and go to videos, and then under the search option, you can type in canal cholesteatoma, and you can also type in benign osteonecrosis, and you'll have some examples where I really talk about the conditions in depth and the pathology behind that. So even at this stage, I've removed a massive plug of keratin there, but I still can't fully appreciate how wide this ear canal is. Now, in very severe cases, this ear canal can widen so much. If it's on the anterior wall, so on the right hand side, it can start to impact with the jaw joint, the temporomandibular jaw joint, the TMJ. If it widens posteriorly, it can start forming what we call an automastoidectomy. So the bone to the back of the ear canal, so on the left hand side, we call that the mastoid bone. It's air filled, it's porous, it's got honeycomb structure, and quite often it can get infected. It's called a mastoiditis if the mastoid bone is infected. But if this plug of keratin continued to widen, it can potentially merge with the mastoid bone. We call that an automastoidectomy. Of course, it can go downwards to the bottom of the jaw, and rarely, but I think it has been documented, it can go upwards towards the skull base, which can be very dangerous indeed. So I'm just peeling this keratin's the roof is crusted, but more medially it's quite, because of the humidity there, and that's where that smell and odour is coming from as well. The skin's become a bit more mushy and stuck to the eardrum. And you can see the different shades of keratin. You get all the whiter sections, which is more recently shed skin, and you've got the darker piece of skin, which is more on the core, which is the oxidized skin. So why does keratosis obturans occur? It quite occurs secondary to inflammation. When you've got inflammation of the ear, you have a high turnover of dead skin, and the skin can't migrate out of the ear quick enough, so the ear can't expel the dead skin quicker than it's actually producing it, so it forms into a plug. Sometimes the skin, as it sheds and moves, instead of moving sideways, it moves inwards, so it forms into a plug. So there are some potential causes. Even poking and rubbing inside your ear, if you cause some irritation to the ear canal, itself, then it can initiate those osteoclasts, which can then cause a localized widening of the ear canal, where you then get skin collecting, and that can then potentially lead on to canal cholesteatoma, but can also lead on to instead keratosis obturans. So a grade 1 is when a patient attends with pain, hearing loss, but there's no significant or notable widening of the ear canal. With a grade 2, the difference between a grade 2 and a grade 1 is that there is some visible widening. A grade 3, when there's moderate widening, but also some granulation tissue, which there is here. There's also inflammation in front, laterally, of the keratin plug on this side. And a grade 4 is when the widening is so severe that it invades into adjacent structures, so as I described before, the TMJ or the skull base, the floor of the jaw, or posteriorly to the mastoid. So that's your classification systems. Grade 4 typically has to be removed surgically. Even there's cases that I've read where grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3 has to be done surgically, just because it can be very, very painful. The patient attends with pain already, and it's excruciating acute pain that a patient generally experiences with keratosis obturans. So you can see the skin here is a bit difficult to peel. I'm going to put some drops in. I'm confident there's no infection now because I cleared this. There's no perforation. Just because of that odour, I was a bit worried. I didn't know where that was coming from. So I'm just going to install some drops just to soften this skin, which I can then peel away. And you can see just below the suction tip, that's the base of this widening. The skin's intact, so the epidermis layer of skin's intact. There's no ulceration, there's no infection there. In a case of a potential, if that skin was ulcerated, you'll get some discharge there. That would then be potentially a canal cholesteatoma or benign osteonecrosis. But this widening is quite global. It's more or less the southern hemisphere of the ear canal, so the south equator region. And to the left, you'll get a better view in a minute. You can just see the sheer force this plug was up against the canal wall. There's a ridge there. Now, there is a possibility, I did advise the patient that this ridge is something the patient was born with, so it's congenital. And that ridge then itself can prevent the proper migration of skin, because it causes almost a hurdle for the skin to go over and out of the ear. But I just suspect it is due to the keratosis obturans. So it's almost like the chicken and egg scenario. What came first? It could be that ridge was there before, or it could be as a result of the keratosis obturans. We will never know which way. So I'm just peeling some keratin off the patient's eardrum here. Quite often patients with keratosis obturans can have a thickened eardrum. They have additional keratin on the outer epidermis layer, because the outer layer of the eardrum is made up of the epidermis layer, which is the outer layer, which also lines the ear canal. So there's some bruising there. The impaction is quite severe, and it's also where some granulation tissue was. Then you've got this big widening all the way of the floor on the front and the rear of the ear canal. So there's some keratin here, the next layer. So I just want to peel this away just to make sure there is no underlying ulceration and potential canal cholesteatoma. So it's very important for a diagnostic point of view that you just look underneath this blanket. So if you've been following my channel, especially very recently, where, for example, on the left-hand side, you can see some keratin here. And it's only once we remove this that you see an underlying pathology like a canal cholesteatoma. But it would otherwise go unnoticed. So wherever possible, I appreciate it's not always possible for a specialist to do it because it might be uncomfortable for the patient, but the specialist doesn't have the optics, or they're very new to performing earwax removal, so they don't have the experience. And it is a process. I mean, when I first started, these will probably be out of my scope of practice to perform. So as you can see, there's no underlying pathology visible here. There's some crusted keratin here, so we'll just peel this away to check. I mean, some of the skin, because of the humidity, it started to almost become very moist and damp and sticky. And at that stage, you've got to be careful because they can release some proteolytic enzymes, which can then create an ulceration of the skin. So just on the other side of this ridge, there's some keratin here, so I'm just peeling that away. patient was really pleased. They are an avid follower on both Facebook and YouTube, I think, so I've told them to keep an eye out for this video tonight. So moving forwards, I've just asked this patient to use some medical grade olive oil actually on a regular basis. If in some cases the keratin builds up and it's very difficult to remove, I would normally then recommend some sodium bicarbonate drops, but because it just has it works better with the dead skin. But if you're going to use it on a regular basis, sodium bicarbonate drops can sometimes dry out the ear. It reduces the acidity in the ear because it's alkaline, and when sodium bicarbonate drops enters the ear, it reacts with carboxylic acid, which is released by bacteria that feed on the sebum. So sebum is a lipid oily secretion secreted by the sebaceous glands that are found on the outer third of the ear canal, adjacent to the root of the hair follicles. So sebum releases, the sebaceous glands release sebum, bacteria feed off it, and they release, as they do, they excrete a carboxylic acid. Sodium bicarbonate reacts to that, and then it liberates into water and also carbon dioxide. So you get the effervescence, the bubbling, when the fluid changes, converts to the gas. And that mechanical foaming almost is believed to help break up the keratin. Also, in parts of the skin cells where there's less keratin, skin is actually, by default, hydrophilic. They really they enjoy water, they absorb water. So the skin cells, especially freshly dyed skin cells where there's probably lower keratin content, you can just see that ridge there on the left-hand side. So skin by nature is hydrophilic, and that's why these oils are really important. It protects the skin, otherwise the skin will absorb the moisture, they overhydrate, the skin cells will enlarge and burst and break. So, but when you've got Keratosis obturans, that's probably not a bad thing when it has formed into a plug. If you're going to use drops on a regular basis, I'd much prefer medical grade olive oil. So the difference between medical grade olive oil and, for example, extra virgin olive oils, when it's extracted and refined into the medical grade olive oil, there's no chemicals involved, whereas from my understanding, that's what makes it medical grade. But with extra virgin olive oil, for example, it's my understanding that some chemicals are used in the process. So the oil may not be, they may have some impurities in there. So with medical grade olive oil, you're ensuring there's no impurities, so it's just safer to use in the ear. And that will also help to moisturise the skin because it is quite dry and thick. It's not going to stop the Keratosis obturans forming, I would have thought, but it would just make the process easier to remove. And as I said, typically every year I would recommend, one of the things I mentioned to the patient is that they wanted to know whether it's possible for this bone to kind of fill up, and I said it's very unlikely. It's going to be, unless they have surgery, to either have some graftings put into place to fill up those widenings, or alternatively have the adjacent bone and cartilage widen to, so there is no cavity like this, there's no widening. You just widen the whole ear canal to make it smooth surface, which then allows hopefully the skin to naturally migrate. That when you have a widening like this, you're going to very likely get a build-up of keratin now on a regular basis. So just in the first instance, come back in a year, and then we can reevaluate whether it's a yearly or 2 yearly event for them. So there was just this keratin at the roof. I just used the ear pick to retract it, elevate it off the roof of the ear canal, and I've gone with the forceps and just manipulated that out. So we're just getting the jaws either side, and just giving it a little wriggle, and then we just managed to pull it out in one single piece, which is great. So I'm very pleased with that. Thankfully, so was the patient. Eardrums intact, otherwise healthy. You can really get a good perspective of this widening. There's that ridge, and on the left hand side, that's where that wax was really pushing up against the canal wall, and so the patient instantly felt the pressure relieve in their ear, and the otalgia, the pain dissipated. So this is the left side. Wasn't really causing them symptoms, but wanted to get this out. This was extremely hardened ball of keratin, and so I've got the tip of the ear hook locked in behind, and I'm just going to roll this. You've got to be careful that when I'm pulling the hook and extracting it, that I don't lose control, because if this hook goes over the keratin ball, for example, or through it, you put so much force behind it, you've got a flailing instrument in the ear, and that tip can actually quite easily cut against the side of the ear canal. So you have to do it in a controlled manner. So pull that away. You've got this thick layer of keratin in a moment that we're going to extract using forceps. There was some blistering actually as a result, so it should settle fine, but the patient didn't notice. I showed it to them, but again, the skin was so strongly adhered that it did cause a bit of blistering just there at the base of the ear canal. It's like sometimes when you've got some dead skin on the side of your thumb or fingertips and you peel that away. There's just some keratin at the front, lateral process part. So just rotated the jaws of the forceps to get the necessary grip. Just pull that away. You can see here there's no widening of the ear canal. There's no ridge. And that's the patient's eardrum. And that's the contents of both ears. As you can see, mainly it's dead skin, a bit of wax, but predominantly keratin. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. Take care, keep well, and speak soon. Bye.